What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. It is peace or panic time because obviously we've seen enough basketball to decide whether these teams need to hit the panic button or if they just need to chill out and everything will be fine. Before we get into it, the question everyone actually wants to know the answer to, Mr. Hughes, how the heck are you?
I'm doing fine. Happy to be here discussing peace or panic with you. It's a good time to do it because it's just early enough to where either reaction can be irrational, but we're just going to do our best. So I'm excited about that. But also because I'm turning over a new leaf, how are you doing?
I was editing the last podcast. I was like, he's now going to ask me every time because he's the type of person to remember me saying that. I am doing okay, although I do feel a little accosted. I know it. These are automated stuff. I got anyone who listens and who might care knows that I've been taking a gym break just because my body was so battered and I got so sick. So I took 2 weeks off. By the time you listen to this, it goes out on Saturday. I will have been back to the gym, which is exciting. But I got a text message this morning, Grant, from my gym saying, "We miss you. It's been a bit since your last workout." It's like automated. Like, do you need help, like a trainer or something? And I was just like, I feel so accosted right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is if you ever, like, say, fell down your basement stairs or something and were trapped at the bottom and needed someone to check on you, maybe your gym would be the
13 days later. Yeah. If no one found me, my gym would be all over it.
If you could survive that, do you have any canned goods down there you could live on?
I should stock them now. Right.
Yeah. So well, that's nice. Thanks, Gym Computer, for showing some concern.
So yeah, for anyone who cares, they should be pumped that I get to go back to the gym on Saturday morning, and I'm ready. Like, I'm itching. I made it to 2 weeks. My entire family is shocked that I made it to 2 weeks. I'm ready. I know no one cares about this, but I'm so excited. I'm going to talk about it anyway. I'm ready to get back.
Hey, I asked how you were doing, so obviously I care.
We're doing better than some of these teams. I can say that right now. Before we really get into it, I did want to ask you, the way I approached it was, I'm not putting, records matter here, but I'm not putting as much stock in the raw records, especially if there's injuries. And because some of these teams, I think right now have a winning record. And so I'm more so looking at it. Have I seen they're one, clearly not doing as good as they were supposed to or would like to, but two, do I see anything that would make me, I would say, concerned longer term in a way that's, no, the answer's not currently on the roster and time is not going to fix what we feel ails them. And that's the approach that I took through this exercise.
Yeah, I think it's always, and as I'm scanning the topics we're going to hit here, like, it's always more interesting if there's something beyond just like, oh, they're 2-6 or whatever. That's bad. Like, I think that's the right approach, is to look at it and say, like, well, are any of the things contributing to this bad record? Like, are there going to be easy fixes, or like, what does it mean if you can't fix this over like a multi-year time horizon, potentially, even for some of these teams? Like, I think, the ones that have little, like, where the cracks like go out a lot farther than or go a lot deeper than you can see on the surface. Those are the good ones you want to focus on for something like this.
We begin with the Milwaukee Bucks, Grant. I didn't give you any sort of say in the order was. I have it in a doc, and I just put the assets for the screen together in that order. So that's the order we're going in, and you have no say in it. How does that make you feel?
I mean, I just had to scroll down like 4 teams to get to them in my notes. So, you've inconvenienced me pretty greatly here. I'll get through it though. Thanks.
So the gist of, do you want to do the gist? I know they're a team you were thinking about. So did you want to do the gist of what's concerned you about them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, even though this isn't the total focus, it's helpful to start with the basics. So they're 2-6. They have a negative 4.5 net rating. That dropped by about 4 points, I think, or maybe a little more. It might have been in the 9s prior to a win the night before we're recording this. So that's Thursday night against Utah, which, by the way, that was a game until like a good chunk of the third quarter had elapsed. And so, I think it was a 23-point win, which, helps the net rating and all that stuff. It's still Utah, a 1-7 team that is just like mailing it in. I mean, because they're just playing a bunch of young guys, but to a ridiculous degree. And it was a game. So like Milwaukee, and it was at home. It was in Milwaukee, and the Bucks had to like actually like nut up to win that game. So that 2-6 is still pretty iffy to me. I don't know. We could just talk about like what's not working here. I guess kind of split up into little bits. But like the thing in your notes, which I think is appropriate, is just like the sky's falling. It just feels like this is a bad situation for any number of reasons. I don't know. Do you want to talk about like some of the specifics of like what's not happening on the court for them to succeed, or is the macro like here's the overall situation and why it's tough? Is that more interesting to you?
So I think you look at and just their overall vitals, which again can still be skewed when we're like 8-10 games into the season. You look at them being 19th in offense and you're just kind of like, all right, whatever. Like that's just not, there's no way that sticks. And you can at least, I guess, I mean, Gary Trent Jr. before he was demoted from the starting five, which he signed in Milwaukee under the guys that he would start. I do give coaches credit for kind of throwing that out the window. Like you need to do what you think is to win. Is Andre Jackson the answer to that? I have no idea. I didn't watch, to be clear, I didn't watch Bucks Jazz. I was keeping track of the score. And it was the third. I think it was the third quarter. Maybe it was the end of the first half and the Jazz were leading. And I was like, oh God, if they win, this will be a disaster.
I will say Jackson did, it's a huge problem if like, oh, he's the solve, but like he definitely did. He's super energetic, very athletic, like he's like a make stuff happen guy. And he did inject the Bucks lineup with that. And it is a lineup, generally speaking, that skews old and unathletic and just not quick. And he was notable for like how he just stood out because he is quick and he does play hard and he is like disruptive. So, but like, I mean, okay, so that's kind of what Gary Trent was supposed to be as a defender. Like he's a steals maven, but like Jackson did bring a lot, I think, of what the Bucks must have hoped he would bring. But how much that matters when you're in this overall tough situation is hard to say.
The fact that we're sitting here talking about Jackson, though,
100%.
is just kind of an indictment of itself. And I think, look, you can also chalk Gary Trent Jr. is going to start hitting shots eventually, I would assume, is my guess. And then Chris Middleton, it's both concerning and then also a relief. It's okay, he comes back, the offense in theory, Giannis has to do even less on the ball at that point. So the offense, I really do believe, will be fine. I don't know what to make of this defense in terms of, okay, well, what's the silver lining here? They do a better job, I think, keeping opponents out of transition when they're missing shots, but like they're still just getting destroyed in transition. I think a lot of that comes back to the old and unathletic stuff from you and their half court defense. It looked like it's not at one point this season grabbing those defensive rebounds was an issue. They really haven't been an issue of late. And like, you're still getting burned in the half court. I think because, and maybe Jackson helps with this more than Trent does, but the ball containment on this team is still really bad. And that's the other thing that comes back to, well, they're not super athletic or mobile. It's just beyond a Antetokounmpo, who like we're talking about 30-year-old Antetokounmpo, who's not supposed to be like, that's just not how he defends. That's not a criticism of him. They just don't have that guy. And if Chris Middleton comes back, look, Siri's even bugging out about the Bucks start. The thing that I'm really just thinking about is if Chris Middleton comes back, I really do believe he will be fine on offense. What is he going to look like after all these surgeries on defense where he's kind of already slipped? So isn't there a chance that their core lineups aren't going to be as equipped to get stops here? And I think that's my biggest takeaway before throwing it back to you is the defense is the bigger problem to me, even though the offense hasn't been great. And I don't know that they have the in-house fixes to fix that. The in-house fixes to fix that. How's that for verbiage?
They don't. And I would say even just to piggyback on that a little bit, the Middleton return like might make it worse, right? Like it didn't do the opposite. Like defensively, I'm talking about specifically. So just to further illustrate again, like, oh, they're old, they're unathletic. That's just like, okay, where are your numbers? Okay, here's some. They're 30th in offensive rebound rate. Now, sometimes that's a tactical choice, but their transition defense also sucks. So that's a real problem if you're not crashing the offensive glass. And that's kind of a hustle thing too, right? Like if it's the case that the Bucks are being told like, go get those offensive boards and they just can't, well, then it's like, all right, well, that explains the transition defense. I don't know, like that they're sort of two separate issues. The point is they're not getting second chance points because they're not beating anybody to the offensive boards. They're also 29th. They were 30th until the Jazz game in forcing opponent turnovers. And it's just like, so not only are you not like, sometimes you can be a bad defense because you're gambling and like, okay, maybe you're just risking giving up points because you're trying to create chaos. They're not doing that. And they're also just not sound as like a keep it in front of you kind of defense. So like Damian Lillard, look, like, I think it's time for like an acknowledgement that like, this has been the knock. If you were in the camp that, oh, Damian Lillard's overrated. Like if you had ever had that thought and like really embraced it over the last decade plus, you'd point to like, he's a terrible point of attack defender. And so like, he has to be great as a singular shot generator and 3-point shooter and pick and roll ball handler on offense to offset that stuff. And he's still great at all the offensive stuff, but he's just worse at a thing that he was already very bad at. So I forget who had it. There's a stat that he's getting targeted more than anybody else as a pick and roll defender. Like, they're just calling him up opposing offenses and just like over and over again, finding cracks and just exploiting his inability to defend the point of attack. And that's not going away because you can't take him off the floor because he matters so much to your offense, which isn't all that good anyway. Like, so there's the fixes are just like, you would normally just say, oh, they got to trade for younger guys or trade for more disruptive defenders. And like, they can't. So it's I would say that if the Bucks pull out of this, it'll have to be because they just figure out how to be like a top 5 offense, because the defense, I just don't think they have the guys that can make a big enough difference athletically, turnover producing like that. Those guys aren't on the roster. And even if they are, like say Jackson, you can't give him a role where he plays like more than a healthy Middleton, because that's not how NBA rosters work. So yeah, I think the defense is really kind of an intractable problem. Now watch them go rank top 10, for the rest of the year, but it's a personnel thing, I think, as much as anything else.
I have wondered, though, just because so many guys, I mean, you look at Bobby Portis is shooting really poorly from the perimeter, ditto for Brook Lopez at this point, and it makes you wonder, as we're talking about all these guys who aren't making shots, once you make shots, in theory, your defense will then be able to get more set.
Sure.
And should just be better off. But when you watch this team, you don't feel that. Honestly, not that you make the case it's even worse, but they're 28th in points allowed per possession after they make a shot. So it's like your defense has the opportunity to get set and you're still bottom. Like, that is the thing that I think stands out the most. And to your point about the pick and roll stuff, you said that, it made me think of it. So I looked it up. There are 2 teams that allow more points per possession to pick and roll ball handlers right now. They are the Atlanta Hawks.
I was going to guess Atlanta.
By the way, I will say Trae Young puts up more defensive resistance at this point than Damian Lillard. I think that's probably, when it comes to screening, maybe that's probably the way to say. And then the Detroit Pistons, who are just, they're the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah,
so
because Jalen Duren is low-key really terrible at playing the cat and mouse stuff.
The final question here is, we're not going to get into the Giannis trade stuff. Maybe we'll do something on that later, but they've already come out and said they're not going to trade him. It's not a reality right now, as the reporting from ESPN. I'd be shocked if it happens mid-season. I want to go the other way. Like, is it time? Like, if you're actually committed to making the most of this window, does it make sense to say, all right, like, it's time to put the 2031 draft pick on the table. We can't aggregate salaries, but we have Bobby Portis's money. Hell, we have Brook Lopez's money. If you think the right opportunity's out there, maybe someone wants Middleton. Is it reckless if you're the Bucks to think in those terms, though, with the Giannis noise floating around, or even given the reality that, okay, well, who's the player that would be available that's just going to solve everything here?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd call it reckless, because like, it's kind of like just being pot committed. Like, what's one more first at this point? If you're gonna say we're not trading Giannis, then I do think just throwing that up, like, what's the difference? Like, okay, so now we're just out of picks through 2031 instead of 2030. Like, I don't know. It doesn't. So I thought you were going to say, does it make sense to start looking at a Dame trade, which I would also say you should do before you start thinking about moving Giannis. But yeah, again, now you're right that, like, who's the guy? I don't know that there is the guy out there that Portis in a first or Lopez in a first will get you that's going to solve all the issues. But
I had one idea that may need to be fleshed out a little bit and involve some other teams. And again, the Bucks can't aggregate. So, like, this is the guy that goes out and that's it. But right now, would you consider giving up Chris Middleton and your 2031 pick for Dylan Brooks? And I don't even know, like, Tari Eason. Like, would the Rockets even do that to get Middleton? That Bucks distant. Tari Eason's been good this year, but that 2031 pick, if you're a Rockets team worried about paying Eason in his next deal, you have Jabari, you've paid Şengün, you have Jalen Green. Doesn't have to be Eason. They have other players they could send out, but, like, is that a deal? Honestly, Eason would be the more intriguing piece to me, obviously. But if it's just Dylan Brooks, and again, other money in there to flesh it out, is that too ridiculous from Milwaukee's end to say, well, we're going to trade this guy who's just ingrained into the fabric of their Giannis era success, plus our 2031 pick to get back Dylan Brooks, who's decidedly a role player, but way better than anyone defensively on the roster right now, aside from, of course, Giannis.
I mean, I would just ask, like, who do you think is going to be, if you just view it through, like, in terms of total volume of contributions, who's going to make a bigger positive impact over the next, 3 years? Middleton or Tari Eason? I would probably just pick Eason because I think he's at the point in his career where you could count on him being healthy. I know he missed a ton of last year, but compared to Middleton, who's the trend arrow on his career is pointed down at this point with the injuries and the age and all that stuff. So no, I don't think that's a ridiculous thing to pursue. I think I wasn't with you when you said Brooks first, but once you got to Eason, then I was like, yes, that's exactly the type of guy that you would want on this roster if you're trying to solve all these like athleticism and hustle problems, particularly on defense.
I don't think the Rockets do it personally. They're seventh.
No, I don't know why they want Middleton.
Yeah, well, I think the idea would be someone who can come in, not just generate looks, but like it's more floor spacing around their main guys. And they're seventh in offense, but 29th in effective field goal percentage. It's so bizarre. I wouldn't do it if I was Houston. So Rockets fans tend to get mad at me when I throw out Eason trades. I'm just talking from the Bucks. So what's the verdict here, Grant? Is it peace or is it panic?
It's panic. It just has to be. I mean, we didn't even talk about Doc Rivers. When's the last time Doc Rivers like turned it around for a team? It feels like the opposite tends to be what happens.
Guaranteed they're going to make the playoffs.
He did. That was, I mean, if you don't believe in yourself, who will? But that's a bold claim at this point. What's the stat over the last 25 years? 3 teams that started 1-6 made the playoffs, and the Bucks.
Yeah, it was pretty low. It was, and he guaranteed it though. So that's the Doc Rivers guarantee, which means Bucks fans.
This is the perfect time to panic.
So, yeah, sorry, Bucks fans, but it's panic time. Our next team, Grant, that you again have no say in the order, the New Orleans Pelicans. I'll take them. You did the Bucks. So, look, injuries are the story here. Tell me who's healthy on the Pelicans roster right now. That might be easier. But when all said and done, Trey Murphy, who is yet to play this season, he will have missed extensive time, along with CJ McCollum, Herb Jones. We saw Zion get bit a little bit. Like he was dealing with a thigh/quad/hamstring thing, and then he was playing. Jordan Hawkins, who's been good this year, has some back stuff going on. We're all really excited because Brandon Boston Jr. is making waves, which is not something that you could have seen coming here. So this team is they're just banged up. Oh, DeJounte Murray, of course, is out. They're banged up. However, you look at, I think, Zion Williamson's season has been wildly uneasy, and I don't know how much of that will change as they get healthier. I'm sure some of it will, but his rim pressure and finishing, like they're just not as standout as they were right now. He is, I don't use the words checked out. He's clearly not as good defensively as he was last year. And so if he's not going to be the Zion that you and I believe is just a top 10 to 15 player in the NBA, that's an issue unto itself. I think the bigger issue is even with Brandon Ingram, who we've been pretty hard on. So credit to Brandon Ingram for bringing up his 3-point volume overall. This team's offense still just doesn't make sense. They're bottom 3 in points scored per possession, dead last in defensive rebounding rate, which who could have thought after just letting Jonas Valanciunas and Najee Marshall both go. Even Misi's had some really good stretches, but you're just not equipped to end possessions for other teams right now. I do think opponents are running a tad hot from 3 at the moment. They're around 40%. But the Pelicans are also dead last in the share of attempts that they're allowing at the rim from their opponents. So that's the defensive stuff. Like there's a clear dip there, and Herb Jones will help some of it, but you were undersized to begin with and maybe not equipped to be elite on that end. I find myself just more concerned with the offense because I think when you look at the talent on this roster at full strength, that's how it skews. They're still 18th in half court efficiency, and they're too slow overall. I know a lot of people have pointed to that. They're about top 10 in transition frequency. They are still in the bottom 5 in overall average offensive possession time. They're just not making an effort to run after they're grabbing rebounds. Like that needs to be more of a focus when I think you could argue it needs to be more of a focus when you have everybody, but especially now when you're not equipped to break down set defenses. And so you combine that with the lack of 3-point attempt rate, and it just sort of, and like, okay, when you are in transition, great. You're not efficient in transition right now. So I don't know. Again, we can chalk some of this up to injuries, but like between the Zion unevenness plus what they were doing on offense before all these, Murray was injured out the gate, fine. But like even before they really got banged up, the offense was just not turning heads in the right way. And I don't know. We know the solve is, well, you need to render a verdict on, are you trading Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum, and figure it out from there. But I'm sure there's a level of, well, do we need to see if Brandon Ingram is taking this many threes, and we also have CJ and Trey Murphy in the rotation, and we think we can sprinkle in minutes for Jordan Hawkins places, is there a path to this team just kind of figuring out what I think is their biggest concern would be the offense? Because I do think they punted on some, not defensive versatility, because they should be pretty versatile defensively, but they inherently punted on, but we're just not going to be big on ever on defense, and we're not going to be equipped to hit the glass like that. So does this team have the latitude to say, hey, like, let's see if we get healthy and we figure it out with this current construction?
I think yes. I think I have a little bit of a different take on it. I'm more concerned defensively. So I was going to say, I think yes, you probably should, if you're New Orleans, just hope you get everyone back and then see what that offense looks like, because this is a team that the decisions they made and didn't make with respect to roster construction that I think intended to just like outscore people. I still think that's possible with the personnel. And now look, all of the lingering, how do you build a team around Zion Williamson? Like those are all still there offensively. Like he's just his unique strengths and weaknesses are just like, it's just weird and hard to build a sustainable offense. Cause if everybody's healthy and he's playing at peak levels, you can have him on the ball. He's a load to guard and you can spread the floor around him. That's a great theory of an offense. I still think it's worth seeing if that can work. Defensively though, like, I mean, didn't we spend all last year trying to decide whether the Pelicans actually were good at defending threes or were lucky? Like, but remember that when that was the narrative, like that'd be nice if that's what we had to focus on now. Cause it's just, you said it, like they chose to be small. And I think even if you're healthy, even if you've got Herb Jones and Trey Murphy and DeJounte plays better defense, looks more like San Antonio DeJounte as opposed to Atlanta, you're just so small and you're so bereft of a backline defender that can clean up messes that forget. I mean, the other thing, they're dead last. They give up more offensive rebounds than anybody. And that's clearly just a size thing. And Zion being often the biggest guy on the floor is just like, he's not a good rebounder, like full stop. That's just part of the package with him. So I don't know how they fix the defense. I could imagine the offense sorts itself out when healthy, but the other side is just like, you're always going to be small. You're always going to be vulnerable at the rim. You're going to have a hell of a time finishing possessions with defensive rebounds. Like we know that. So I think that's where I'm actually more concerned. And I don't know what the solve is other than we trade Brandon Ingram for a big guy, which is like the most hack, over discussed angle about this team that we haven't left alone for like a year. So I can understand why you're concerned with the offense. I just think of the two, the defense is more of a worry for me.
I think why I'm concerned with the offense is you mentioned it at the top of what you just said of like, that's what they were supposed to, like, right. That was where their identity was supposed to shine through. I think we were all always worried that the 3-point volume still might hover bottom of the barrel, but the DeJounte Murray trade and then the way that they built their front court to me was very clear an investment of, we're going to be an elite offense and we believe the defense will be good enough. And look, until the Herb Jones injury, like they were surviving. And so I'm not saying I have more hope for the defense. I think I'm just more down on the offense because is this really just a full strength personnel? Like if DeJounte Murray never gets injured, is that what the difference is? Or has Brandon Ingram been forced to take more threes now? Because I don't have answers for what their offense is going to look like at full strength. And I feel like we should. And maybe also what might just really be tainting my view of it is Zion has not been consistently like the Zion you would want. He was sick to start the season. Again, now he's dealing with some lower body stuff, it seems like. And that kind of lends itself to a different question here is, you said you could trade Brandon Ingram for a big, but can you?
Yeah.
And what is this? And that's also looming over all this. It'd be different if they were just running roughshod over everybody, but they're not. And so you still have the Brandon Ingram contract situation looming over all this. And I know you didn't pay Trey Murphy, I guess, a ton. Some people were expecting more, but this isn't going to be a team that pays everyone moving forward. And so if you're trying to scope out even post December 15th trade opportunities, I don't know what it is. Part of me did the Pelicans think Jared Allen was just going to be eminently gettable? Because the way the Cavs are playing, I don't think he would be.
No, I was going to, if you want to really work big to small in diagnosing what's going on with the Pelicans, is it over big? How big of an overreaction to what's happened so far is it to ask, like, can Zion Williamson be the best player on a team that makes a deep playoff run? Like, I know we're dealing with fewer than 10 games from him so far this season, but he hasn't looked, I'm getting struck increasingly by the thought that like for this to work optimally for New Orleans and for like to overcome the weird roster building constraints that having Zion in a major role presents, like, doesn't he just have to be like the guy that's getting you 27 on 60% shoot? Like, does he have to be that great for the whole theory of this team to work? Or, you know what I mean? Like, is it time to like really ask, can you have like this version of Zion as a like be all end all, figure on your team? Like, certainly this one isn't good enough, but like, does he actually have to be like the spectacular version of himself we've seen for like 30 game stretches a couple times? Like, is that the only way this team can win a couple playoff rounds? I mean, like so if you're working big to small, that's definitely like the top line question you have to ask. They're not going to trade him obviously, but like, it's something I've been thinking about.
Well, but what happens if the answer is no?
Then your whole team needs to be reevaluated, right? Because you've made a lot of decisions based on the idea that Zion can be your number one on-ball creator at high volume for a whole season and postseason. Like that's what the thinking is for this team, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I'm just saying, you've now gotten to a point where you're not out of options, but if you don't think Zion is like, what if they decide that Zion's more equipped to, like, well, we're just going to have him be the primary screener and we'll try and find someone who's like taller and be able to stretch the floor around him. And he's more of a secondary option. Mm-hmm. And then it's, well, what does that mean? Does it make Brandon Ingram and DeJounte Murray more important? Does it make them less important because now you want someone who's going to be a better shooter that's running those actions with Zion primarily? And look, I'm saying I don't have the answers.
Yeah.
And I tend to be higher on this team than most. And I really want to see what they look like at full strength. But I think we also have to acknowledge that maybe through no fault of their own, I would say that's never going to happen. How many years have we been saying this?
Right. That's the thing. Like, well, the problem is, Zion could put together an incredible 2 weeks and then we just have to say, well, that's okay. So yes, you can build a team that's going to win multiple playoff rounds around it, but the fact that it can come and go and has often gone, is like a problem. He's a great individual offensive player. He's just hard to build around. And it doesn't help that, again, you don't have the whole complement of supporting players around him to get a sense of like, okay, we've got a sense of how this works. Let's tweak this, that, and the other. Like you're more than any other team here. We're just like lacking information, I feel like, on New Orleans because of all these injuries. That's a cop out, but it's the fact. But
it's still, for me, the verdict is panic time.
Yes, agree.
This is the perfect time to panic.
Is our next team ready to panic, though, Mr. Grant Hughes? This is a big one, I think. The New York Knicks, they have what is a top 4 offense right now, but they've lost some games that you would have liked to have seen them won. They're under 500 as we record this. I think specifically, you get beat down by the Celtics, okay, whatever, but like the games against the Rockets and the Hawks, those feel like games specifically they should have won. I think you look at what's happening and the defense when you filter out the Boston game. I know it's a big game to filter out, but it has not been bottom of the barrel. It's been statistically, it's been fine. They're almost in the same vein of the Pelicans, except they do have a top 5 offense that it doesn't look convincing. And it was supposed to be indomitable. And I think, look, a couple problems here I have 2 major thoughts on this. And this is your team, but I'm seizing it because it's the Knicks. So I apologize.
Please do.
They're dead last in average possession time right now. I believe that might have ticked up a little bit. So maybe they climbed to like 28th or something. No, they're dead last in average offensive possession time. They're bottom 7 in fourth quarter offense. And that's without the Celtics game included. Jalen Brunson has not been great. He's dribbling the ball more per touch. And he's always going to be, I think he led the league in like average possession time last year. But the fact that he's still in the top 2, I think that one is from Jonathan Macri of Knicks Film School, had the rankings of it. But I'm looking at it, and this was my take on it. The fact that he still needs to have the ball that much, to me, feels problematic. But he's not doing a good job of keeping it moving. And he's contributed to the Knicks kind of slowing down and having this rickety process. My other takeaway, though, watching them is even in a game against the Hawks where they shoot really well from 3, the supporting cast, and you and I have talked about this concern before, and it feels like it's coming to bear, there is this glaring lack of secondary, let's call it aggression, and creation. Josh Hart is aggressive. He will give you rim pressure. No one else is really right now. It doesn't help that Mikal Bridges is not shooting all too well. And Karl-Anthony Towns, to be fair, Karl-Anthony Towns has been Karl-Anthony Towns. For anyone who
Mhm.
didn't watch him in Minnesota, by and large, there's probably been some more defensive miscues this season. That's a symptom of a new team. But like, this is the Karl-Anthony Towns experience. Is looks like a megastar certain games, feels like he vanishes in others. But like, when you're watching the ball move around, it's almost sometimes to a detriment. Where if like Jaylen Brown doesn't have the ball, you don't trust that Mikal Bridges or Karl-Anthony Towns or like OG Anunoby might be even more aggressive when it comes to attacking closeouts than those guys right now. You don't trust that these guys aren't going to pass up threes or chances to get going downhill to swing it to Josh Hart in the corner. And then he will either dribble or he'll shoot. And defenses are going to be okay with that. And it's so weird for me to be focused on the offense when they're top 5 in points per possession. But the process hasn't been convincing. And here's where my concern kicks in. They are going to be absolutely fine offensively during the regular season. My qualms are when you look at the fourth quarter, when you look at crunch time, I feel like those are going to provide sometimes, or at least a fair amount, of glimpses into how you're going to function in a playoff setting. And right now, this Knicks offense, whether it's Jalen Brunson's fault or a roster construction thing or both, there's still too much responsibility on Jalen Brunson, or there's still too much Jalen Brunson for a team that played basically every trade chip that it had over the past, 9-10 months. And that's kind of my takeaway. I'm worried about the defense. Mikal Bridges, relative to what Mikal Bridges is supposed to do, has not been great. Benji Holtzman over at Knicks Film School had a good little Twitter thread about this, how there's been some kind of miscommunication between him and OG. I think OG has cleaned up a lot for the Knicks defensively. I almost feel like unless Mikal Bridges is really going to become like peak Mikal Bridges, they might be one serious defensive player short on the perimeter to tie this all together at both ends of the floor. So anyone who's waiting on Mitchell Robinson to come back and like, well, let's just play him and Towns together. Yeah, do that. Try it for sure. One, it's going to come at an offensive cost. And two, now you're putting a different type of responsibility on Karl-Anthony Towns defensively. He showed that he can handle it in Minnesota, but like Mitchell Robinson is not Rudy Gobert. So
yeah. So I'm curious. Do you think, I know you said the offense you think is going to be, or did you say the offense you think or the defense you think is going to be fine?
I don't know what to take away from the defense because they're 21st overall, but I think if you filter out the Celtics game, they're like 7th or 10th or something.
It's totally fine overall, bottom line, without the Celtics game. But there are some, like, I don't know if you mentioned the opponent rim accuracy is like
through the roof,
unsustainable. Like, I think I was working on something the other day and I had Cat as allowing 83.8% inside 6 feet. And I think if you slice that thinner and it's like inside 5 or 3, you can get it's like he's like allowing like 90% almost.
Hey, that's lower than the 100% he was allowed. He's like the opponents started off shooting 12 of 12 on the season against him at the rim. And he is, you're right, 84.6%, by the way, is what they're shooting against Towns at the rim.
So my question is then, like, that's an insane number. Like, nobody allows like that level of rim accuracy over a full season. So I was going to ask, like, I think everything you said about the offense, the concerns there, totally well-founded. Like, I think it's jarring how often, I mentioned this already this season, much earlier in the year, how often other Knicks players, when they touch the ball, just immediately look for Brunson to come get it back. And it's like, I mean, talk about being predictable and not having any kind of flow. Like that's an issue. So that seems stylistic, but the defensive issues seem personnel based, particularly with Cat as your rim protector. And those numbers are extreme. So I'm just having a hard time deciding which of those two things I think is most easily solvable. Like, will the rim accuracy by opponents just regress because you can't continue to give up 90% shooting? Like, sure, that seems reasonable. And can the Knicks open the offense up a little bit so there's a little more flow and less just like Brunson dribbles the air out of the ball, gives it up, gets it back? You know, it's like it takes forever into the shot clock to score. Like, I don't know how you solve that one. Like, the defense, I think, might just correct itself a little bit. But I don't know how you change. Like, you just have to introduce someone else that'll make decisions, or you have to get Tom Thibodeau to just tell guys like, hey, just play free, fellas, which seems like so antithetical to what you think of with him.
But it's also, you're talking about the guy to make, who is that guy?
If it's not, the thing, you don't have that guy.
It would have to be, it's not Campaign. It's not Tyler Kolek. It's definitely not going to be Precious Achua. It's not going to be Pacome Dadier. It's supposed to be Karl-Anthony Towns or Mikal Bridges. And I think in theory, everyone who's watched Karl-Anthony Towns enough knows that it's probably never going to be Towns. And I know that you could probably do more about teams are comfortable right now putting smaller players on Towns, and he's not attacking them. They're not really trying to throw him the ball down low. I don't know if that's going to open up a ton of stuff, because then if you're putting Karl-Anthony Towns down low, opponents are probably going to take that too. Like, he can mash those dudes, but like, he's not going to do it consistently. And then like, you're giving up the 5-out spacing that you said that you wanted.
Right.
So I'm inclined to say like a lot of stuff is going to normalize, but I don't know what the long-term defensive outlook is for this team. I assume it'll get better just if Mitchell Robinson gets healthier, but even just look, the starting lineups in the 9th percentile of defensive rating, and opponents have run hot from 3 in those minutes. But like, when you're running hot from 3 and at the rim, like, are both those things going to regress to the rival offense? So that is concerning. Look, they've had some success when you're plugging Deuce McBride in there at points. But that, by the way, that's also another problem with this team, is right now they go 6 players deep. This is a 6-player team. And I think you could even argue on a lot of nights it's a 5-player team based off how people are playing. I would say that at their peak, if you expect them to run deeper than 7, that's ambitious. And I think people will campaign and Precious Achiuwa and Mitchell Robinson and Miles McBride. No. Yes, to 2 of those guys, but you can't, not all of those guys are going to give you this playoff depth. And look, you're going to shorten your rotations anyway in the playoffs. So 7 guys that you trust, I would argue, is enough, or at least close to enough. But to get through the regular season at this point, and when your offense is so efficient, but it also right now feels fatally flawed, am I just an idiot? Like, is that an incoherent take where it's, yeah, the offense is top 5, but it has like these fatal flaws?
Yeah, no, that's why I struggle with it. But yeah, no, just like, you got to have someone besides Brunson that can do, like, it just feels way too heliocentric. I get, we need to do this. I know it's silly, but like, are we having anything close to this conversation if Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo are on the roster and Cat isn't? Like, do you think, like, what's the same and what's different about, because I would imagine that offensively we're not having a similar conversation about like, oh my God, Brunson has to do way too much. There's no scoring depth. Like, no one else can do anything. I don't think we might be having the defense conversation, but I don't know that we would with the offense, which is nuts because Cat is supposed to be a phenomenal offensive player.
I think we might still be having the conversation because the Knicks aren't generating rim pressure with pristine spacing as it is. And I don't know that Julius Randle, I guess on the ball, he's going to get to the rim more than a Karl-Anthony Towns would, but is he going to open up the floor for everyone else to do that? I don't know. If you have Dante DiVincenzo instead of, I honestly don't know. That's what's so, I do think that they would have more secondary creation on this team, but then you have to ask yourself, like, what does it look like defensively with Randle and Dante DiVincenzo? Okay, fine. But Randle instead of Towns as your de facto big, is that actually any sort of an upgrade? Maybe in certain one-on-one situations, perhaps. It's fascinating. And I'm still, to wrap up, I guess, on the Knicks, unless you have other thoughts, there's still so much. This team needs more time. It was just put together. I do think, I guess, I don't know how importantly to view the prospective return of Mitchell Robinson in like 6 weeks or whatever it's going to end up being, or by 2025. So 8 weeks, whatever it is. But like, does he help like to a degree where it's like, we kind of just need to get there and then we can evaluate this team? Or is it for you? Is it all right? Like, we reached December 1st and we're still dealing with these up and down performances. It's time to, what is it time to do?
I would say Robinson would help. And I think maybe counterintuitively more with the offensive stuff, because like the second element of the Knicks scoring that was so good in addition to Brunson over the last couple of years is just they get every offensive rebound. And that, I mean, a lot of that was Isaiah Hartenstein, but Mitchell Robinson, was a thing before Hartenstein got there, and just getting offensive boards and firing it out for threes. Like, remember how many, like, they generated the most points off offensive boards of anyone in the league last year because they would just turn them into threes. And maybe that's like actually the difference is like, okay, so now when Brunson can't do something on his own, the possession ends, as opposed to last year, half the time, that's an exaggeration, but a lot of the time you were getting second chances and they were good looks because Mitchell Robinson was getting offensive boards. Like that might just be the main difference this year. Because look, last year they were first in offensive rebound rate. They're 18th as we're recording this today. So maybe that's that's not nothing. That's a big factor. You don't think of Robinson as like, oh, he's going to solve the offense, but he would give them an element back that they don't have right now.
But then it's sacrificing the element that you have as a team, like when you're actually looking at the spacing, because you can't even trust. You can trust Mitchell Robinson to like maybe finish lobs, but you definitely not trust him to do any decision making with the ball. Right. You could barely trust him to hold on to the ball on his catches. So they're fascinating. I am personally inclined to. I'm going to give them time. I'm going to panic. Oh, Bert doesn't agree.
Bert does not agree with you. I didn't even hear what you said if it was peace or panic because someone rang my doorbell and the dog's going nuts.
I'm gonna go with peace here. What about you?
I was hoping you'd say that. I think peace is the right call.
This is no time to panic.
Anyone who likes Toy Story should better appreciate these little references we have going on here. Our next team, Grant, and I know you've been itching to get to this one, of course. The Orlando Magic, who I would say I guess it's been a few games, so they're not an 11th hour entrant, but this is probably not a team that we would have thought we'd be talking about if you asked us about a week or two ago. Do you want to take us through what's going on with them? They're not missing anybody, right? Or are they? I can't remember.
You start this discussion with the turning point of the season, which is Paolo Banchero's oblique injury. I would say predictably, the offense has just crumbled since he's been out. They're dead last in offensive rating since he got hurt, and it's like the margin is not small. The guys that you would hope could step up, Franz Wagner, max player Franz Wagner, Anthony Black, who I think had looked pretty good, and I continue to be more optimistic about. Those guys are just kind of overburdened in more like primary and secondary creation roles. Karl-Anthony isn't playing. Like Black had overtaken him in the rotation, hasn't made shots. And I guess the question is like, do we just view this as like, well, of course, Orlando is struggling to score without Banchero. Everybody already knew that, offense was a weak point for this team. We've been begging for another, shot maker, shot creator to be added to this roster for a couple of years. So like, yeah, Banchero's out, they're going to fall apart. Like, no problem. Well, when he's back, they'll be good again. Or is it more of like is it highlighting a more structural issue that like, yeah, no, we do need to be able to do something without Banchero. Like, so is a gap year okay? Or are we already a 47-win team that's trying to win now? So we got to make a trade to fix it. I would say like, before I turn it over to you, it's always more, I don't know, comforting or less panic inducing for me when a team is struggling in exactly the way you would expect it to struggle if they lost a certain player. So like, this is just like, it's like a very direct A to B thing. Like Banchero's hurt, they can't score. Like, okay, yeah, I would have been surprised if that had not been the result. So does that change anything for you? Or are you, or I don't know, maybe the more interesting thing is the last question I asked was just like, can they afford this? Or is this a situation where you might need to make a move?
So if it were me, I would make a move just because I think that their defense can be good enough. And like their offense was good with Banchero, but you framed an interesting way where it's, well, if you don't have Paolo Banchero, you're not going to win anything special anyway. But I do think it comes back to, you expect him to return in time for the playoffs, but you need to be in a position to still be in the playoffs. And right now, your offense is so, Grant, it's not even close when you're looking at how they've performed over the past. Like they have an offensive rating outside of crunch time under 93. And like, I think it's 92.4 was the exact number I had written down. That is putrid during those, like it dating back to the game where he actually suffered the injury. And where is the solve, the answer that's on the roster? I tend to be higher. I actually just wrote about how I think Jalen Suggs has improved again year over year when it comes to his playmaking and decision-making. He and Franz Wagner, they just all look overtaxed. I don't know that that's ever going to be Anthony Black's best role to run more of a methodical offense type. I also think you have to ask whether, okay, let's just say not everything's about half-court initiation per se. Okay, fine. Are you then equipped to, all right, like, let's just play faster, get out in transition more, and maybe create chaos that way? That has not been Orlando's MO under Jamal Mosley. And I think there's probably a debate as, do they have the personnel all the time to do that? And the answer might not be no. They're definitely equipped to play faster. And we saw that. We've actually seen that through, like, I guess for small stretches, but it's never been something that becomes part of their identity. And so even now they're 22nd in average offensive possession time, and they're getting out in transition, I think a little bit more than last year, but they're not efficient in those situations. So you're not going to be able to tread water that way by kind of being, okay, this is not, we see bad teams do this a lot, whereas we don't have a ton of creation, so we're going to play faster. Mm-hmm. And in the Magic's case, they're so good defensively and they can create so much chaos defensively that you could almost envision a scenario where, all right, hey, that actually works. Like why? But again, they're not a team that like forces turnovers a ton relative to the league average. So, hey, maybe that doesn't work, but you do grab defensive rebounds a bunch. I think they're the best defensive rebounding in the team in the league right now. So I do think there's some low hanging fruit. And I actually hadn't thought of it as, well, you would expect them to suck on offense without Paolo. So it's almost encouraging that that's the answer. But if he's out, the word that's been thrown around is indefinitely.
Yeah.
You need to figure out a way to win some games. I know the East is weird where 500 might just get you a top 6 spot. At this point, they're not playing 500 basketball without Paolo Banchero. And so I'm not saying they need to go out and trade for LaMelo Ball or go all in. But once they have, some of these restrictions lift on the salaries that they could trade, they are built to make a move for someone who is a prominent part of their rotation, even if it's not the all-in move. Like you can go out there, I would think, maybe this is too all-in, but a Kobe White. We've mentioned, how many times have we mentioned Anthony Simons? He's not a super great initiator, but he does enough, and he's going to open up the floor for everybody else that it would pan out. I think that even if Banchero is going to come back, let's say before January or something, that still is something they need to investigate, because now you've shown, all right, we can't tread water without him. And minutes without him, they'll be important in the postseason. Like he's not going to play 48 minutes a game. And so you want to have, I'll frame it this way to close it after my long ramble. They need more alternative safety valves on this team, because the ones they have, there's such a big drop off. I think this is probably one of the bigger drop offs when you look at the level of their number one option to their number two, certainly among good teams. Look, they might be running into the same issue as kind of like the Knicks, but the gap is probably even wider between Banchero and their second best initiator.
It could, I don't know, that it could be. I guess like I would just say nothing that's happened with Banchero out has like actually changed what I think about the Magic and what they need and what they should do. It's just it's just very clearly illustrated that what we've been saying, but not just us, what everybody's been saying forever about, they just need more guys to create shots. Like that's true with Banchero. That's obviously true without him, and his absence just highlights that, I guess. So like, I think whatever level of urgency you thought there was for them to go, go back farther, like try to sign Malik Monk or try to trade for Simons or try to trade for LaMelo or whoever you want to pick. Like, I think you should feel exactly the same way as you did before, which is like, well, clearly they need that.
But isn't there something to, okay, they have the ability to do this and the flexibility to do it over the summer and didn't, and now they're in this situation? Like, doesn't that have to add a layer of, because I'm assuming they were banking on, we're just going to have guys that develop enough to handle this. And I'm sure they didn't expect to go without Paolo for such a long stretch of time. But this is, okay, it's comforting that this is where you're supposed to struggle. This is the exact scenario in which you should struggling, but there was a way or ways for you to not be so bottom of the barrel offensively in this situation. And I would say they actively opted against exploring players who could help them there.
Maybe I should tweak what I'm saying. What I think I'm trying to convey is like, I think the level of urgency Orlando should be feeling now about getting more offensive shot creation is the level they should have been feeling over the summer. Like, okay. Right. Like it should have been like, surely they knew that Paolo was this important, or should have, because you sort of you don't get to believe Paolo is going to be an all NBA superstar, and then at the same time think like, oh, we got enough if he gets hurt, or like those two thoughts like don't get to coexist. So I think it's clearly urgent now. It should have been something that Orlando viewed with this current level of urgency in June and July, like just because this is the most obvious like struggle stretch for a team you could have ever foreseen. Like when he went down, this is exactly what should have been expected.
Now, does it change at all though? Like, is there less urgency because this isn't, yes, it's a team that is built to compete now, but did anyone have them build as a contender? And so does that take away as we get to like, is it peace or panic for you? And what's the nutshell reason as to why you're going that direction?
It's still peace for me. Even though like we just said the word urgency 50 times, just because you have the core, you still have the outs and the flexibility and the ability to make trades. You're not stuck like a lot of these other teams are. You weren't a contender before, like you were just trying to crack that group, and you're sort of still there when you're healthy. So like, I don't view this as a panic situation. I think you're young enough, you're projectable enough, you know what your needs are. I still, it's peace for me.
So for anyone keeping score at home, Grant is going.
This is no time to panic.
I'm going to.
This is the perfect time to panic.
I'm not going to excuse what they decided not to do over the summer anymore. This is now, that's proof of the doubt, and you're good now. And look at the lay of the East, Grant. The way they were playing, like you want to talk about who's the third best team in the East? It could have been Orlando.
Could have been
with Paolo. And now it still could be. How long are you going to be without Paolo? You don't have the personnel to survive without him. That's an F minus level of decision making from the front office still. We move on, though. I'm glad we disagree. This is a big one, Grant. The Brooklyn Nets. They're winning too goddamn much.
Too good.
Panic.
What are you doing, guys? They were supposed to get 4 wins until like January. This is bad.
This is the perfect time to panic.
Yeah, it's a super quick one, but like Dennis Schroeder needs to be like, they need to bench him in every single home game. But like, he has been lighting it up, and they're winning too much. Grant, this offense is top 10 in half court. Dennis Schroeder needs to be suspended. He's playing too well.
Conduct detrimental to the team. Get out of here.
Or conduct not detrimental enough to
not detrimental enough, and therefore yeah. No, we could, obviously this is like half a joke, but like, not only are the Nets like competent, they're kind of fun. Like they're playing hard. I think whatever the first year Jordi Fernandez coach bump is, they're getting it. Like the guys seem bought in. Everyone you would be excited to see something from, like Noah Clowney's had some flashes. I very much enjoy the stylings of Cam Johnson, as just, I trust him to shoot it whenever he's open. And some of this secondary playmaking stuff is interesting. I don't know how sustainable it is, but yeah, like Cam Thomas is doing what you want Cam Thomas to do. They just have been like a hard playing, like shockingly exciting, watchable team so far. I don't think that'll continue, but you can't just keep banking these wins. You got that pick back for a reason.
You have a 2-year window to be. Look, they don't even have Trendon Watford back yet, and he's going to add at least 15 wins. So easy. It's panic time for Brooklyn. Our next team, I really hope people understand the bit there. If they don't, that's just tragic. But the next team, Grant, we're on to the Nuggets. Have they graduated from this discussion? And it's not even just the win over OKC, but that was riveting as hell for anyone who was watching. But like, now we've kind of seen some higher leverage moments where not only is Michael Malone trusting the quote unquote kids, but the kids are delivering. And even when they're not, Peyton Watson against the Thunder misses consecutive crunch time 3 throws, then has the game winning block. Russ, it seems like, tried to give his former team a victory there, but he looked like he was going to smack Shea in the head or whatever it was on that play. I don't know if you saw it, but where are you at with this team? Because I think, look, Aaron Gordon, he's out with that calf strain for a while. Jamal Murray, he's still in concussion protocols. Have you seen anything on him? But he missed a few games. Yeah, I think the bigger thing is, even when he was on the court, it wasn't like he wasn't setting the world on fire for most of it. And they got into a point where Michael Malone was playing him independent of Nikola Jokic less frequently than ever. Mm-hmm. And they're still incredibly dependent on Jokic. Surprise, surprise. It's a 3-time MVP. That's not breaking news here. There's still just something like, do you think that they've graduated from us having this discussion? Is my question.
I think we didn't even discuss which teams we were going to talk about beforehand, and we both picked the Nuggets independently. So I think that's a pretty good indicator that, like, no, they still are at least worth a conversation. I think it's a couple things. Like, it's nice that I guess Malone has started to embrace some of the younger guys. And I mean, some of that's by necessity just because of injuries, but I think like that's encouraging to me. That it's not encouraging that it took injuries to get Watson and Brown like more real minutes. Brown's a little different category at this point. I think he's kind of established quite a bit more than Watson has, but I don't know. I still think some of the structural things we're concerned about are there. And you start with just like the financial picture, the lack of flexibility, if you're trying to make trades, it's like, what can we get for Zeke Naji? And what, that's just like, that's still an issue. The on-off splits are still insane. Although it's really funny to me that Christian Brown now has the biggest positive net rating swing. It's 39.7. Jokic is a real bum at 34.8. But that's just because their minutes tend to be matched up almost exactly. all that stuff is still there. The low 3-point volume, they're dead last in the league, but they're making 38.9% of their threes, which is 6th best in the league. So like
Michael Porter Jr. is coming alive a little bit. Seems like
shoot more, I guess would be my suggestion. If you're going to, let's get that percentage down to like 37, but let's get you in the middle of the pack, and attempt rate would be nice. I think the panic is more of the structural bigger issues, the lack of depth, the lack of flexibility, the can't survive without Jokic stuff. That's all still there. And if you're talking about a team that has won a title and has a 3-time MVP and should absolutely only care about winning a title, that stuff all matters. That's all relevant. I guess some of the, their offense is in the top 10 now. They got a winning record. All that stuff is great. But so you're not panicking about anything quite like that. But I mean, Aaron Gordon's out, Murray doesn't look himself, and all that other stuff is still there. So they have not. The answer to your first question is no. They have not graduated out of this discussion. To me,
is there? How encouraged are you by the recent performances we've seen? Not even just from the quote unquote kids, but like Malone turning to them. Was it? We had that piece from ESPN, which was clearly, let's just say, it was heavily sourced from Calvin Booth, I would argue. If you weren't, I saw this, I was listening to What's in the Game NBA, the What's in the Game podcast, and Will and Grace were talking about how if you didn't know anything about the Nuggets to this point or what was going on behind the scenes, you would have came away being really frustrated with Michael Malone and thinking that he was the villain, basically. I thought that was a great way of putting it. So, but did they finally just take enough clubs out of as Russell Westbrook, he's starting, so it's not like he fully trusts the kids there. And he did insert, I think it was against the Thunder, he put Russ in for Strother for defensive reasons, which I get it. Russ has had his moments. He's still frenetic there. I don't think they've graduated either. And I would say they're still just beholden to the whims of ambiguity more than any should be contender is supposed to be. And I think the bigger issue here is that, okay, even just look at what they're doing. I mean, you said this we've said this how many podcasts now, just looking at the decisions they've made over the past few off seasons, even with their mini MLE, you're now still beholden to the whims of Russell Westbrook, which it's just never a good thing. I'm sorry. It's just post whatever year, 2017. It's just not a good thing. And I think the bigger issue is, okay, fine. This is the reality. This is what you're trying to do. The front office has made that clear. The fact that you can't count on your second or third most important offensive players to consistently be the second or third most important version of them. And look, if you think Aaron Gordon's more important than MPJ offensively, that's fine. But I'm talking about MPJ and even more specifically, Jamal Murray, who needs to be the second most important player offensively. And we need to get to a point where we're talking about more than, man, his chemistry with Jokic is insane. And just look at some of the big time moments he's had for a championship caliber team in the postseason, a team that actually won the title. We got to move beyond that. We've reached the point of his career where it's how do we separate what he is with Jokic, what he has done in the past, versus if they're going to do this without sacrificing what's left of Jokic, sacrificing a chunk of Jokic's title window. And I would say it's generous to say, what did Booth basically says, we think his title window is about half over. Nobody. It's unless one of these other guys turns into a superstar, you've got title windows closed super fast. And I would say, while Nikola Jokic feels like he's built to age well, you have threatened to run him aground for the past half decade. So I'm leaning towards peace with this team because I guess maybe I'm really buying into kind of some of the recent performances, but they're towing the line for me.
They are. I think just Jokic's presence. I mean, he won that Oklahoma City game. Just forget the numbers. He just was in charge of what was happening on the floor. If you have that guy, it's hard to be too panicked. And the other thing is, I do think you can see, it feels like nobody wants to be on Calvin Booth's side. It doesn't seem like, because of some of the decisions that have been made. But I do think you can see the vision of what he sort of thought might work for this team, which is that Brown and Watson and Strother have to matter. Now, it took injuries to give them the opportunity to matter. But I do think, to varying degrees, Brown being the most significant, those guys are contributing. And that should that continue, I think then suddenly, the depth and the non-Jokic minutes and the lack of flexibility, all those things that I raised as concerns matter less because, okay, we got 2 or 3 younger guys that are cost controlled and helping, and should continue to get better. So I can see the outlines of sort of what the theory of this. I keep saying theory of the team, but I don't know. It's stuck in my brain. I can see the outlines of it with this group. So I think it's a piece for me as well.
This is no time to panic.
What about this next team, though, Grant, as we move on to your beloved Philadelphia 76ers?
I mean, can we just skip to it? No. So the injuries are the story. They just, you get Paul George back and Tyrese Maxey strains the hamstring. Joel Embiid is suspended. At least we know when Embiid will be back. That'll happen on Tuesday.
Is there not some type of investigation into, he's suddenly ready to play after he got suspended?
This is a baseball thing. This is a baseball thing where pitchers will get suspended for throwing at bat or whatever. And like, they only pitch every 5 days. So if they get like a suspension, it's just like, okay, it's cool. They're just not going to pitch then anyway. It's very much what's happening here. Like Embiid probably wasn't going to play. So we'll just eat these suspension games that way. That's what this is, right?
Isn't it? And I guess they covered themselves by kind of leaving his status up in the air, because it was never, Embiid's out for X amount of time or indefinitely, so they're allowed to do something like this. I just don't.
I mean, so like I know the numbers are what they are, and I guess we could talk about them if you want, but like the early season stats are screwy anyway, and for this team, it's just like it doesn't matter because no statistical. Well, I don't know, maybe there are some. But like what statistical achievement or failure is actually like indicative of what this team will be going forward? Because Embiid hasn't played yet. And like any second that matters for the Sixers, Embiid will be on the floor and hopefully George and Maxey. So it's like, we actually don't have any sense of what this team can be. But obviously then the problem is that we don't have any sense of what this team can be because the guys that matter are hurt. So like that's the start, middle, and end of the story for the Sixers at this point is just the injuries make it impossible to know what they are. And the concern is that they'll just continue to be like the injuries won't go away, I guess if you're panicking, that's got to be why.
Yeah. Even digging into their offense, which has been bad, it's kind of like, all right, what are you trying to take away from what might stick? And they're shooting 40% on wide open threes. And so even looking at the guy, like so many players are missing shots right now. So even looking at how much they've struggled, even looking at the fact that they're not getting their 30th in rim percentage. And that's not, is Joel Embiid and Paul George, how much are they going to fix this version of Paul George? But we haven't seen them together. If anything, like, do you come away from this team thinking that, they were playing kind of slow, even with the version without like two of their older stars? Are they just a little bit older and not as athletic as you would like them to be that maybe we were considering coming into this? Or is it like, do we just focus purely on the injuries? I guess what I'm getting at is there any one thing about their struggles on the floor that you're willing to monitor as they get to full strength? As I'm not sure if this is a thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would say I feel like there's been a lot of stuff pre-injury about Maxey's struggles as a creator, like getting into the lane. I think there was a stat like he had 1 assist the other night in which he touched the paint and delivered a pass that resulted in a score. Like he's not that, like that's not something he does well yet. Like he's just not a guy that breaks a defense down and creates shots for other people. So I would be worried about that, particularly if you're asking him to like attack in advantage situations off of having Embiid, draw doubles or whatever. Like, are they going to have enough creation if Embiid isn't like an MVP level player? Maybe, just because George will help with that. I don't know if I guess to answer your question, I don't know if I look at any particular trend or stat so far and trust it to like start being concerned about it. Just like because I don't know. It's part of the reason I haven't watched a ton of Sixers so far is because like, what am I going to learn about this team that matters without Embiid and George on the floor?
Yeah.
Like that's like, the lack of speed, the slower stuff, the dearth of athleticism, like, yeah, I could definitely see that being an issue. But I don't know. I guess I'm not ready to make huge judgments without seeing the team as it's theoretically going to look when the games matter.
Having said that, silver lining, being 6th in free throw attempt rate when Joel Embiid is yet to play.
Oh my
God,
God,
impressive.
That's great. Yeah.
So, but is it So it's just, let's just say it's just the injuries then. Is it peace or panic? We don't have to spend a lot of time on this team. It's okay, these guys will come back, but for how long? And at this point, so Maxi's out, they say at least 2 weeks with the hammy injury. Do we see the big three play together before Thanksgiving?
So this is why, I don't know, I'll just jump to it. It's still panic for me because I want to drop the.
This is the perfect time to panic.
Do you enjoy this at all? Am I the only one who's like,
no, I'm very much enjoying it. That's why I stopped so you could do it. I just don't. Why are we confident that the injury trend is going to reverse? Why do we think that, okay, once Paul George and once Joel Embiid are back, it'll be fine. They won't play back-to-backs, but, we're going to get 60 games out of them. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. And this is a team that's designed to win now immediately, and the playoff seeding stuff might matter, and that's going to be hard with 1 to 2 of these guys not playing all the time. I am just concerned with a roster that I don't believe can stay healthy at the top. And I don't know if the start of the season has a whole lot to do with that. I think that was a concern all along.
Well, do you know what's interesting? I think it was Nate Duncan or Danny LaRue, or both of them were making this point. The load management stuff from the Sixers, it makes sense in theory. You want to see the stars play. Is the season too long? These guys get paid enough money. I'm not trying to have that discussion, but is the NBA built for teams to do that anymore with so much parity? Because their point was, and I think it bears this out when you look at the standings. I mean, in the Eastern Conference, as we're recording this, the Pacers are at 500 and they have the 3rd seed in the East. It just feels like there's fewer bankable wins on the table. Now, later in the season, maybe that changes as Chicago and Brooklyn kind of have their come to Jesus, trades like fire sales. But as of right now, you're conceding ground that you're already kind of working. If you thought Joel Embiid was going to miss 20 games regardless, you're already kind of working with a slim margin for error. And that's why I am with you that you have to panic, because 1, you can't bank on these guys being available. And it's a fair question that by the time Joel Embiid comes back, how many wins do you have? And do you just have enough time to make up the gap to avoid the play-in, essentially? So
this is the perfect time to panic.
Our next team, Grant, these next 2 teams are tough for me. I don't know how you feel about them.
Yes.
This was your nomination. I didn't have them in here, I think, because my expectations for them were low. Is this our expectations were low, but holy F moment? Is it did Dan and Grant record the segment of, are the Lakers are they proving everybody wrong? Did we jump the shark on that one? What happened?
That's just how fast things change. The 3-0 start gave way to a 1-4 road trip in which the only win was a single digiter over the Raptors. So not a great follow-up to what looked like and sold me, I think, to some extent. Oh my God, JJ Redick has got this wired tight. He's got the Lakers doing what they need to do. Anthony Davis is empowered. Austin Reeves, like all the stuff we talked about, like not that long ago at all. It's just some of the most, I don't know, not jarring, because like maybe you could have seen this coming, but like concerning numbers. This is the worst transition defense in the league in terms of opponent points added per 100 possessions, 29th in frequency, 30th in points allowed per play. Like, I mean, if this is the only issue, I guess that's sort of an optimistic thing, because you can just like say, hey, fellas, get back, and maybe you can be the 20th transition defense instead of dead last. Can't be that hard to fix. And this is the number 12 half court defense. So like, okay, that's, better than they were a year ago. They were 16th last year. I don't know if that changes any of the like bigger concerns we had coming into the season about, can LeBron and AD stay healthy? AD's got a foot thing already that I think he's going to play through, but not great when you hear that it's lingering.
Is never, that's never
no,
fun.
and it's been around since last year. It's like, okay, cool. Well, like, why are you playing the Olympics then? I don't know. We had a fun ride with the Olympics anyway. But so I guess I'm having a hard time choosing between the extremes of the good start and the brutal road trip. So I don't know. I'll throw to you. Like we've got the numbers. The transition stuff is a big deal. Is there anything else that's like standing out as what are the other reasons we're even having this conversation about the Lakers if we just ditch the record and talk about like what's actually happening with?
Well, how many here's my question. This is probably a little too basic, especially for the way this podcast conducts itself, but who do you trust outside of Rui, LeBron, AD, and Reeves?
I can tell you JJ Redick does not trust D'Angelo Russell. We learned that 6 minutes in the second half the other night. Did you see the video of Redick like in the chair, in his coach's chair, as Russell like just goes to sleep for the 3rd time in a row and gets back cut or doesn't play defense. He's like slamming the chair cushion. Have you seen this video yet?
I have not seen the video. I did see the clip of his, like, he wasn't shy about talking about it. And he complimented LeBron too.
Yeah.
Maybe try to pad those future podcast downloads once LeBron and he retire or something. But I respect it, by the way. Like, that's just, I appreciate when coaches do that. I know the optics are, this is LeBron's friend, and he's a first-time coach, but what has everyone's complaint been with D'Angelo Russell? Is probably one of those is like the biggest things of just falling asleep, taking bad shots a lot of the time on offense. He goes on those heaters and it's fine, but like he just falls asleep or doesn't look like he's engaged on defense.
Redick's fate, like it's a 2-minute clip from the presser where he gets asked about, ultimately he gets up, the question is like, what are you going to talk to the team about the effort level or whatever? And he goes, I just did. And then like drops the mic and walks off like that. That presser, 2 minutes prior to that, he's being asked a question and his face is like, if you were looking at him, you would think that he's like, it's taking every shred of restraint for him not to just like chew his own tongue off in frustration. Like he's just like, his face so like so tense and tight, like the jaw muscles are strained as he's listening to this question, and all he's thinking about is like, I'm so angry right now about how we play. Like I can't hold it together. He's going to put some all-time press conference faces into the pantheon. I'm convinced already as a first-year head coach. And I think it's actually good because it's going to take like some come to Jesus talks to get some of the stuff ironed out. And maybe you can't get D'Angelo Russell to try all the time. Like maybe that's just not possible. Like, I mean, his career would suggest like no one's ever done it. No one's ever managed to get max effort from that guy over a full season. It hasn't happened. So like maybe Redick being like looking like the angriest version of Quinn Snyder sometimes, like Quinn Snyder's had some faces too. Maybe that gets it done. Maybe it doesn't. Surely they can fix the transition defense. Like that's a whole team thing. You got to be able to fix that. And if you can do that, then I'm less concerned. But man, like who do I trust? I don't trust anyone other than who you said to circle all the way back. And I certainly don't trust Russell. Like that's just, he was signed to that deal to be traded and then they couldn't trade him. It's just, he's got to go now, right? Isn't that where this is going?
Where are you going?
I don't know.
For who? I mean, the expiring contract, sure, but we can mention Zach LaVine again or whatever, but do you view that as, okay, the offense has ticked down from where they were, and they could certainly use his 3-point volume. I think it's clear. I don't know what anyone was necessarily expecting Redick to do, but you're not going to coax 3-point volume out of this roster. They're taking a fewer percentage of their shots from three than they did this year. Now they've replaced that with some looks at the rim, which is great. So kudos there, but I just don't know. The reason to me, my expectations were probably like, this is where they would be. And I think I probably overreacted to their start. So I'm not inclined to panic just because I don't know what else the Lakers.
This is no time to panic.
I agree. I think it's peace for me. Hit it.
This is no time to panic.
And part of that is they still have a trade to make. Now we've just said like, well, what? But I think like just having that out, they have stuff to do. Like if it becomes clear that Russell just can't be on this team anymore, and like you're going to diminish his already diminished value by basically benching him, like they can make a move. So like, I don't know if that means it's panic if you're making a sort of panic trade, but they have an out. And I'm less inclined to panic if I think a team can sort of clean up some of the personnel if it really wants to.
Do you trust them to actually make a trade?
That I don't know. I wish they'd done it sooner.
Our final full team before we get to some quick hitters, Grant, the Miami Heat. I'm not going to lie. I've said this, that I just can't get a sense of what this team is, either how bad they are or how good they are. Whenever I watch them, it feels like I've said this before. They don't have an identity right now. They're below average in offense and defense. Opponents aren't even shooting that well at the rim or from three right now. When you watch them, it does feel like there's not the same level of, I don't know if the urgency is the right word, but like really just locked in, like, oh, those rotations are on point and they're not going to get thrown off by what opposing teams are doing as much. And so that's kind of, that is supposed to be your identity, because we knew that there would be a slog for this team on offense, but to be at like this point defensively where you don't necessarily trust like your ability to, okay, this is still a team that has the personnel to where they could force some turnovers and create chaos that way. But when you're really just like you're going through moments, especially in third quarters. That was one of my other points. They've had some really bad third quarters here, and they're still a team that does a good job of limiting looks at the rim. And okay, like maybe there's like, could you take in a little bit of luck from our team's going to shoot 1,000,000,000% from mid-range the entire season? Okay, maybe not, but there's just something inherently off about this team. You have some guys who are just frankly not making shots. I think anyone who's watched Jimmy Butler can sense that, okay, there's still a switch he could flip. He just doesn't flip it until the fourth quarter. But if you look at some of his splits, like scoring splits, like compared to the fourth quarter, it's fucking wild. And this is where I'm at with them. And I'm curious as to where you lean. By the way, there's some like weird ban concerns here. I don't know if the Heat are trying too hard to be a 5-out team when they don't have the personnel to do it. This is his most efficient season ever. It doesn't help that Nikola Jovic has not shot the ball well. I think Tyler Hero looks good. We've seen a lot more of Pelle Larsson than I ever thought as a Pelle Larsson fan that we would ever see. And so my question kind of here is, it's not even, can this be solved in-house? That is the question we're asking. But when I look at this team, I'm starting to think, oh, they need a best player. Is that too over the top?
Well, I mean, if it's not, it was Jimmy Butler, and like I just don't know that in his age 35 season, and given the injuries that have just factored into I don't know, the last 5 years, more than that, and based on how he's looked so far this season overall, like 18 a game, that's not enough. Like, and the relying on the switch flipping thing, like, okay, you still got to get to the games where it's worth flipping a switch. And if you continue down this road, you're not going to get there. You're going to make your seating, even for the Heat, you might make your seating such that it's just too hard to get there. They've overcome that in the past. The Bam thing is what's really strange to me. I wanted to double check this, like, because it's improved since, but there was a minute there. He had a big game recently where he was like 4th in shot attempts on the team. And the theory of like, how do we take the next step can't just be Tyler Hero shoots more and makes more like that. It was going to always need to be Bam taking the offensive step forward. And he's still under 40% from the field. He's not making threes. He's only taking 2 a game. That it may just be the fixation on the 5-out or something that's like, yeah, again, totally will concede this is a hard team for me to get a read on, but something does feel off. Doesn't feel like they're maximizing their best players, for Bam in particular. But like a lot has gone right too. Like Tyler Hero's making everything that he puts up, shooting 45% from 3, making half his shots from the field, leading him in scoring by a pretty hefty margin. Terry Rozier's almost at 40% from 3. Like there's a lot of stuff has gone well, around the periphery, but this is still just like, I don't know what this team is. This team's not great at anything. You would have thought it'd be defense, but maybe Hero playing a bigger role makes that impossible. I don't know.
That was it's like, is that a symptom of the defense? Is that we've seen a lot of, okay, you're going to have Terry Rozier and Tyler Hero on the floor together. Is that just something they have to come to accept now then? Not those minutes, but like, okay, the defense is just going to be that.
I mean,
the starting lineup, by the way, is getting annihilated this year. They're like a minus 15 plus points per 100 possessions. It's bad.
Well, I mean, back when the Heat, this is probably 2-3 years ago now, I distinctly remember we had the conversation. It was probably in like a playoff preview setting of the Heat, great defense. How do they score enough? It's like, oh, well, Tyler Hero, maybe he was coming back from injury or something. It's always like, that's your guy. He's going to come in and be an attention drawer on offense and a shot maker, but that's going to compromise your defense. Is it worth it? Is the trade-off worth it? And that's the Tyler Hero conversation with the Heat for several years. And so far it's like, I don't know, maybe not, because like he can't really shoot it. He can't shoot it better than this. Like that's just, not realistic over any kind of sustained stretch. And if now maybe it's unfair to put all the defensive struggles on him. Certainly it is, but like he's not helping on defense. So maybe this is just what you're going to get. This is the trade-off. And if Butler's not a superstar anymore and Bam is not the best version of himself, then that trade-off's actually not worth it. I don't know. That's just spitballing.
I do sometimes the free throw shooting for this team has been inexplicable as well, but I sometimes wonder if like what we're seeing from Bam feels like might be more to do with how they're using him and what the Heat are trying to be. But even if you don't want them to be a 5-out team, like what is is it just we want to play Jaquez instead of Jovic in certain minutes? Like they've gone to like a bunch of different. I know that I saw I don't know if these were Heat fans or just people on social media were calling like Khalil Ware needs to play. I don't think that's the like maybe your defense like if you're going from Jovic to him, or certainly if you're going to break up the dual guards and try and play him, but I just don't know. Like, is it just inserting? Look, they've had some success with like a couple of like the Bam and no Jimmy units, but like that's not going to be the answer. So part of me wonders, is this some early season noise? I'm inclined, if you thought the Heat were going to, and by the way, the other thing that I think is factoring into how I feel about them very quickly, if the problem isn't in-house, like what is the trade? They can get to, I think they can open up 2 first-round picks to trade if they really want to, and they're going to be conditional. Okay, great. So it's 2 picks and first rounders. And what is that? It's 2 picks and salary and who? And the fact that if you actually believe, as I'm starting to, I guess I'm not there yet, that they need a best player, they don't have enough to trade for a best player.
Well, and conversely, what they do have is an expiring essentially in Jimmy Butler that you could trade to go the other way. Like that's way more feasible, plausible, whateverable than the go get the guy who's better than anyone we have, right? Like that steering into it, which is weird because it's not like the Heat are loaded with like, a bunch of other cheap young guys that they can build around. Like the teardown trade is just way more like, I don't know, foreseeable maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to go with, I don't know what my expectations weren't super high for them to be. I don't know what to do. What is your verdict here?
My thought is kind of along the same lines as if a team has outs, which I guess trading Butler would be an out here. I'm less inclined to panic. So I'm going to go piece, but that's also partly because I believe the Heat were going to be a top 4 in the East team anyway. And they've got every chance of just being a play-in. They got every chance of being kind of what they've been the last couple of years seeding wise.
Grant said it. I'm just going to ride the coattails of it.
This is no time to panic.
I could probably talk myself into panicking though. So you know what? I'm going to throw
This is the perfect time to panic.
I don't know that they have outs, because if the out, they don't rebuild. So like trading Butler is not an out to me. Right. We have some quick hitters here. Did you want to alternate like new style? Just no justification. We could throw it to each other. Are you
sure.
piecing or panicking here?
Yeah.
And I can get us started off. Grant, piece or panic on Chet Holmgren's 3-point volume and percentage at the moment?
Piece, not concerned. He does so much else well that like he can be an adequate 3-point shooter, and I'm good with it.
I'm not going to throw up we have like 20 here. I'm not throwing up the Toy Story thing for all.
Okay. Let me ask you, Tyrese Haliburton, looking passive, nothing close to pre-hamstring Tyrese from last year. Well, start with that. What Tyrese Haliburton? Are we concerned?
I'm going to do piece, but I'm getting closer and closer to panicking on that one. He looks out of sorts.
What about Indy overall? Just package it up.
I'm going to say piece, because they have outs. Like they can make trades to get in. We know the wing defender, and the defense has been about as bad as we would expect, where it's like, it's not bottom 5, but it's still going to be in the bottom 10, and they have the rebounding issues. So they're kind of in which team did you say this about? The Magic, where it's all right. Like we know their core issues are like the issues we expected. That's good. But the Tyrese Haliburton stuff, like if that leaks into December, now we gotta have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for you to read them, even though it's mine. Grant, Dallas's offense, their average in points per possession and 3-point percentage, starting lineup, not setting the world on fire. The defense is getting cooked largely on opponent threes there. PJ, Washington, Luka Doncic, Najee Marshall, they're not making threes at a high clip. I know that you're not going to panic about that with Luka. Nobody should. But Luka right now is just the only player that gets to the foul line. Aside from Derek, like the bigs will get fouled. So I will hat tip. People were concerned about Dallas's defense. It's held strong. I think Luka's had a pretty good defensive season as well. Are you piecing or panicking the Mavericks being run of the mill on offense so far?
No, I mean, the defense is probably more concerning. It just, if you have,
why this is a team we've been fine. No,
we view them through the prism of like, can they figure it out on offense in the postseason? Yes, we know that they can. They have Luka, and like guys will make or miss shots, but I can't get concerned about an offense that's run by Luka Doncic.
I'm with you. I think piece is the right call on their offense.
All right. Moving to Charlotte, Mark Williams still out with a foot sprain. And now, by the way, Nick Richards also out. So Taj Gibson has been resurrected by someone other than Tom Thibodeau. So that's fun for him. From SI's Austin Lake, in total, Williams has now missed over 330 days, which means he holds the current record for the longest time sidelined by an active NBA player. Great tidbit there. Mark Williams and or Charlotte, do what you like. Peace or panic?
I'm not going to panic over Charlotte. I mean, they have LaMelo. They're going to be, and they have Brandon Miller. I'm panicking over, if you're going to be mentioned as like in that factoid that a record previously held by RW3, it's time to panic and have a discussion. It's also get Miles Bridges off this team already, please. But like, he's not even good at this point. So what's the theory of him?
That the theory is it's even harder to move him now because you've got the PR stuff and he's bad.
Okay, Josh Giddey, Grant, and I mean, or maybe it's the Bulls at large, but Josh Giddey putting up numbers, shooting well from three, but he is the team's worst net rating swing. Is there any chance this trade, peace or panic, is there any chance this trade doesn't look like an all-time fumble? But because at this point, so he puts up numbers, you're probably not bad enough yet, and we'll assume they'll be bad enough. Then you're going to pay him after he doesn't contribute to winning. I need you to justify peace for me if you're going to go that route.
I mean, it can't really, I don't know how much has changed about, in my opinion on this since the trade happened. Like it just, cause it didn't make sense then. And it's okay. So what now? Nothing's really all that different. I think the way this isn't an all-time fumble is if the Bulls like retain Josh Giddey on a mid-level contract somehow, like that's fine. But yeah, it's just, or if Alex Caruso just suddenly becomes terrible and like that's just what his market value was, that's also not happening. It's a panic like this. The best case scenario with regard to the Bulls and Josh Giddey is what? Like, I guess that he breaks out and is a superstar if we're going to talk about like totally fanciful best case scenarios. Don't see it.
Kudos to him. He's driving the tank in his minutes though. Kudos to him.
Yep.
Props.
Yeah. He's doing what he's supposed to do, even though the Bulls don't really think that way. Dan Simone Fontecchio hasn't made any threes. That's an exaggeration, but not shooting well. The theory of him and several others on this team was that, talking about the Pistons, was that like, oh, we'd open the floor up for Ivy, Cunningham, Asar Thompson if you were ever going to play. Fontecchio is not really helping in that effort. Some other guys are. So how do you feel about him specifically?
I'm going to go peace on it. I think he's just what he did last year, even when he came over into Detroit and what he did in Utah. I think there's the track record there. Grant, peace or panic? Brandon Podziemski, he's helped drive winning, but he's shooting 20% on wide open threes. Peace or panic on his jumper?
Panic on his jumper / scoring. I'm concerned that like just the way he shoots it and his physical frame is going to make it impossible for him to ever reliably get his own shots or be a steady scorer in his own right. Great at everything else though, like, and just drives winning. So I don't know what you do. He's still a super positive player, but the scoring is just, I mean, we talked about this before and it's not going away. Like it's going to be a struggle for him to create his own shots. This is me. Reed Sheppard, our guy who just doesn't play. Are we concerned that he's just basically out of the rotation most nights?
No, I'm going to go peace just because the Rockets, we said it, they have too many damn good players. And this would be something to, if they don't open up minutes for him eventually, and maybe this ends up benefiting him somehow. I have no idea, but I can't bring myself to panic there. Okay. Terrence Mann, Grant, he always kind of gets off to slow starts. He's been uneven offensively. Do we just dismiss this as early season noise, especially given how good he and the Clippers have been defensively this year?
Yeah, I can't. I don't know what anyone expected from Terrence Mann. I think uneven offense is just part of the package. So I'm going to go peace there. I think he's still kind of a really important player there because you have Arden and you have Norm Powell and somebody's got to guard guards and he can do that. I
do kind of find him less important to this team now because you have Jones and Dunn.
Yes.
And if you're going to play Norm Powell a bunch of minutes because of his offense, like once Kawhi's back, maybe that's what and like Amir Coffey's been playing pretty well, even though the net ratings, I guess, will forever say otherwise. What our Discord has called him negative Tatum, negative Jason Tatum. So I found that funny. But yeah, I'd be peace there.
All right. This is a Memphis / Marcus Smart in particular question.
Oh,
This is the perfect time to panic.
Let's just move on. It's panic time with Marcus Smart. That trade, I know this is yours.
It's so bad. It seems so bad, doesn't it? It just gets worse all the time.
He's not healthy, and he was usurped in the rotation before he was injured by just a bunch of dudes. So it's panic time there. I don't even know. He has 1 year left in his contract after that, so maybe you could move him and attach him to stuff. But what you gave up for him disaster. We move on. Sorry, I had a hijack. It's panic time. Grant, Denny Avdia has not looked great in Portland's offense. Is this a surrounding personnel, too many uncomplimentary cooks in the kitchen situation, or is it time to panic a little bit?
I'm not going to panic about Denny. We love him. I love him. I think he's a winning player. I think the situation in Portland is just weird. That they have the two timelines going on. It's got to be difficult for him to sort of catch a rhythm and figure out what he needs to be doing. The shooting is I don't know. He just figured out how to shoot last year, so maybe that was a little bit of an anomaly. But I just like so many of the other things he does. I can't get too worried about it. Still like him.
Next up, Sacramento Kings, Grant, top of the rotation is still playing quite a bit. Michael Brown. I want Michael Malone out there. Mike Brown, I think, is pulled back. We've seen the minutes a little bit more distributed, but is it peace or panic when it comes to they go more than 7 players deep at the moment?
I just say the numbers are where they need to be. They're the 4th best offense. They're just outside the top 10 on defense. So I guess whatever you're doing, keep doing it. But I guess I'd be concerned that Kevin Huerter has been a real part of this starting lineup and rotation, and how much are you going to trust him going forward? And the Keon Ellis
stay healthy, by the way, too.
What's that?
To stay healthy, by the way. He's already missed 2 games, I think.
He's got 6 of he's played in 6 of 8 so far. Keon Ellis hasn't been as big a part, but then I guess where are you going after that? Because Trey Lyles hasn't made a shot, and then beyond there, it's Doug McDermott got a start sprinkled in there. So I guess I'd be concerned that they're going 7 deep, maybe, with the Huerter, piece of it, the Huerter Ellis part being a little tricky. But I don't know who are you giving up to go deep in that rotation? I'm not sure where that help's coming from. I'm not panicking though, just because the team is good. They're 5-3, top 5 offense. It's what they're supposed to be.
I would have been panicking, but Keon Ellis has played a bunch more minutes over the past few games. So Michael Brown has placated yours truly.
2-time coach of the year, Michael. We're going to call him Michael from now on. I was looking at something the other day and I was like, yeah, that's right. He's got it twice. This is a big one. Victor Wembanyama shot selection / offensive usage / what do we do with this guy? Questions as an offensive player.
He's shooting under 20% on catch and shoot threes. So maybe there's a little panic there, but let's see Devin Vassell come back. Let's see the Spurs throw out some units that have they're trying to figure out with Steph Castle. They had him on the ball a bunch during their, was that the Blazers game the other night? And he had some moments. I'm going to give peace because I believe in Wemby. So I aspire to emanate peace. Toronto's defense, Grant, dead last in half court. IQ and Scotty are out, obviously, but does this team have a ceiling that is higher than, let's say, bottom 3 in defense?
I was going to say higher than dead last. Yes, I believe their ceiling's higher than dead last. I would go peace just because, what did you expect from the Raptors this year? If they're bad, that's great. Having Barnes and Quickly just as quality defenders on the floor, they have a higher than a bottom 3 ceiling. And if they don't, great, you'll lose games and get a better pick. Keontae George, Dan, our guy. Let's just go on a 1 to 10. What's your level of confidence in him becoming, I'm going to say, a quality starter in the league long term?
He's shooting well from 3 over the past few games, so I feel like it's a 10. I'm probably if you would have asked me last year, just based off everything, the aesthetics of the game, might have been at a 7 or an 8. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of in the 4 or 5 range.
I was going to go 6. I still kind of believe, but it's so hard to judge him in this environment, right? How can you tell?
I do. I respect the 3-point volume this season, though. I respect it.
Mm-hmm.
And Washington Wizards, Grant, you talked a lot about Alex Sarr, so it's probably peace, but he's 1 of 10 on 2s from floater range, and just his overall shot profile, his finishing isn't super elite. How are you feeling about him as even a play finisher on offense? Let's start that way.
Not good. I think defensively I can see it. Offensively, I just really have questions about how big of a role he should even have in your offense at this point. Now, it's hilariously early in his career, so he can develop 5 skills in the next couple of years that change that. But I just don't know what he's going to be as a finisher, as a shooter. It's really, so I guess it's so early, but if it's peace or panic, I'm panicked about his offensive potential. I don't know what it is.
Are you ready to take it? Look, I know people are going to be upset. The podcast is over,
This is no time to panic.
We will be back next week. Do you want to take us out of here, Grant?
Perfect. Thanks everybody for listening. Let us know what we should have been more peaceful about or panicked about more. I think we did I think we split it pretty evenly. Hopefully we're not alarmists, but sometimes we trend that way. If you haven't already, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure you give us some comments on YouTube. Help the algorithm love us back. Join our Discord. Sometimes we solicit, peace or panics or other things like that on there. So that's a good way to get involved. Links for that in YouTube and podcast description. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. And if you see him, make sure you shout out Frank Ntilikina and apologize to Jared Allen.